Yeah, so when they click Start Learning, this is when this lab environment is going to be spun up, right? As mentioned before, we have to remind them that they will be working with two files. All the functions that they are going to create, they will be adding to functions.py. So those functions can be reused across different scripts that they can potentially create, right? So we're just following best practices from that perspective. And then thread hunting.py is actually the main script from which they will be calling those functions, providing input, output, passing data between different pieces of code and things like that. So one thing to remind them is as they follow these instructions, they need to pay attention to the guidelines that tells them which file they should be adding specific pieces of code to. So right here, it says open threadhunting.py. So what they need to do is they need to click on this file, right? And it will be opened in the editor. So now when they click copy, it will add that piece of code to that specific file. It auto saves, so they don't need to save anything. It's getting saved automatically. So you just need to move to the next code where, again, threadhunting.py, they need to add the second piece, which imports API keys from an environment module, right, an environment file, and then we are assigning those environment variables to local variables within the script that we are going to be using going forward. And then this is the preparation section, right, before we actually go to the use case itself. Then we disable the warnings, and then we create the main section of the script where all the code is going to go to. So then when they go to next section is actually walking them through secure endpoint, the main capabilities, the features, the API use cases, the links to documentation is here as well. When they click Start Learning, it is going to preserve everything from the previous exercise. But this container is going to be active for 2 hours, which should be enough for in-person training. But if that's something they want to repeat on their own, or if they do later, or if you do on your own, right? If you step away from this lab for more than 2 hours, it's going to reset the container and all your work will be lost. That's another reason why we combine some of the lecture portions in the module so that we walk them through the first part of the, like 2 chapters, and then they do the labs, then we walk them through umbrella section, and then they do the lab, and container is still active and all of their work is preserved. So that's another way we had to optimize the lab flow a little bit. So as they go through this, right, we start creating the functions. Again, they need to follow the instructions. The instruction tell them to switch to function.py, so they just click on it, right? And then from there, they again, we have to add same piece of code with the variables. And then we move to actually defining our functions and looking at what we are going to do with this code. Right. So the first section, as I mentioned, it's just straightforward. Some get API calls. First, we get event times, and then event types, and then we print them. So when we added this function, we switch to the main script, and we just add the print statement, and we use prettyprint here. Notice that we already have indentation added here before this code snippet, so it goes into the right place in the main script as it gets added to the end of this file. And then we just click execute. Again, to each, we added this change directory command to each terminal command when we execute the script Python, because what we noticed sometimes they don't land in the right directory, or they move around, and then with the next command you actually have to bring them to the right directory where the script is located. So that eliminates some additional student errors. So basically, as you can see, it's easy and straightforward, and it allows them to focus on executing those API calls, looking at the structure of those calls, and analyzing the output of those calls. And essentially, it reiterates how to build the structure of the script, how to use the functions. You can highlight that here we have input parameters for this function, which include the API host, the API credentials, which is client ID and API key. And then when we execute this function, the output will be the API response that we have received using requests method from requests library. So once you do walk them in more detail through one example, the rest they should be able to follow because they all use the same logic essentially. And then there are comments that give them a little bit more information, right? We have those strings for each of the function, and they just keep going through, making sure they work with the right file. So all exercises follow the same pattern, which is first we create a reusable function, which needs to be added to the function file, right? Second, we add specific code to call this function from thread hunting.py file. So that's essentially what we do here. And then third, we execute the script itself. And that's about it. So again, that's the pattern we follow with for all exercises. And after one or two exercises, they become familiar with it and feel more comfortable, and you probably see less human errors as they go through the exercises. And the end goal of this, if we go to solutions, you can, at the beginning of the lab, you can walk them through this if you want to, right, to help them get started, and then leave them to do the exercises themselves. And then at the end, you can come back and copy the content on the final solution to your working files and just execute that file again and just walk them through the output, which would be